Hello, little dreamers, and welcome to our cozy story corner. Tonight, we're going to travel to a sunny little village in Italy, to the workshop of a kind old woodcarver named Geppetto. Geppetto was a master at his craft, making everything from cuckoo clocks to beautiful music boxes. But even with all his wonderful creations, he was a little lonely. One evening, as the stars began to twinkle, he finished his latest project, a marvelous little puppet made of pine wood. He had jointed arms and legs, a pointy little hat, and a cheerful painted smile. Geppetto looked at his creation and sighed happily. "I'll call you Pinocchio. Oh, how I wish you were a real boy." That very night, as Geppetto slept, a magical visitor fluttered into the workshop. It was the Blue Fairy, with a gown that shimmered like starlight and a wand that sparkled with gentle light. She heard Geppetto's heartfelt wish and floated down to the little wooden puppet. With a soft touch of her wand, she whispered, "Little puppet made of pine, wake. The gift of life is thine." Pinocchio's wooden eyes blinked open. He wiggled his fingers and kicked his legs. He could move. He could talk. The Blue Fairy smiled warmly. "Pinocchio," she said, "if you prove yourself to be brave, truthful, and unselfish, you will one day become a real boy. To help you on your way, I will give you a conscience." Just then, a well-dressed cricket hopped onto the workbench, tipping his top hat. "Jiminy Cricket, at your service," he chirped. The Blue Fairy appointed him to be Pinocchio's guide, his official conscience. The next morning, Geppetto was overjoyed to find his little wooden boy alive and dancing around the room. He laughed and hugged Pinocchio tightly. "My son, my real-life son." He decided that Pinocchio must go to school, just like all the other boys. He sold his only coat to buy Pinocchio a school book and sent him on his way with a packed lunch and a kiss on his wooden cheek. "Be a good boy, Pinocchio," he called out. Pinocchio, with Jiminy Cricket in his pocket, skipped happily down the cobblestone street, excited for his first day of school. But Pinocchio's journey to school didn't go as planned. On the way, he met a sly fox named Honest John and his bumbling cat sidekick Gideon. "School?" the fox sneered. "Why waste your time with books when you could be a star, an actor?" He painted a dazzling picture of life on the stage, fame, fun, and no more boring lessons. Pinocchio, forgetting all about his promise to Geppetto and Jimmy's warnings, was completely mesmerized. He sold his new school book and eagerly followed Honest John to a grand puppet theater run by a large, booming man named Stromboli. That night, Pinocchio was the star of the show. He danced and sang, and the crowd roared with applause, throwing coins onto the stage. Pinocchio felt like the most important puppet in the world. But when the show was over, his joy turned to fear. Stromboli, instead of paying him, locked him in a birdcage. "You're my little wooden gold mine," the man roared. "You will make me rich." Pinocchio was trapped. He cried for help, realizing his terrible mistake. Jiminy Cricket tried to pick the lock, but it was no use. They were prisoners. Just when all hope seemed lost, a beautiful blue light filled the room. The Blue Fairy appeared. "Pinocchio," she asked gently, "why weren't you at school?" Ashamed and scared, Pinocchio tried to lie. Dot, some big green monsters tied me up in a sack," he fibbed. As the words left his mouth, something strange happened. His nose began to grow. Longer and longer it stretched, until a little bird's nest with baby birds appeared on the end of it. He tried another lie, and his nose grew even longer. The Blue Fairy looked at him kindly. "A lie, Pinocchio, keeps growing and growing until it's as plain as the nose on your face." Crying with shame, Pinocchio finally told the truth. As he did, his nose magically shrunk back to its normal size. The blue fairy, seeing he had learned his lesson, opened the cage. "This is the last time I can help you, Pinocchio," she warned. "Remember, a boy who won't be good might as well be made of wood." Free at last, Pinocchio and Jiminy rushed home. But on their way, they once again ran into the sneaky Honest John. This time he had an even more tempting offer. "Forget the stage, my boy. I'm sending you to a magical place called Pleasure Island. It's a land with no school, no rules, just fun, fun, fun all day long." Despite Jiminy's frantic protests, the thought of endless fun was too much for Pinocchio to resist. He hopped onto a coach filled with rowdy boys and headed off to the island. Pleasure Island was exactly as the fox described. It was a giant amusement park where boys could do whatever they wanted. They could eat mountains of candy, play games, and break things without anyone telling them to stop. Pinocchio had a wonderful time, but Jiminy had a bad feeling. He explored the island and made a horrifying discovery. Pleasure Island had a curse. Boys who acted like jackasses were literally turning into donkeys. He rushed to find Pinocchio just as his friend had started sprouting long ears and a tail. Terrified, they knew they had to escape. They leaped off a cliff and into the ocean, swimming for their lives just as the curse was taking hold. They swam and swam until they reached the shores of their home village. Exhausted, they hurried to Geppetto's workshop, but it was empty. A letter carried by a dove from the Blue Fairy floated down to them. It explained that Geppetto, worried sick about Pinocchio, had gone out to sea to search for him and had been swallowed by a monstrous whale named Monstro. Without a second thought, Pinocchio knew what he had to do. He had to save his father. This was his chance to be brave and unselfish. He tied a rock to his donkey tail and bravely jumped into the deep, dark ocean with Jiminy Cricket right behind him. Down in the ocean's depths, they searched for the legendary whale. Soon, a giant shadow loomed over them. It was Monstro. The whale opened his massive mouth to swallow a school of tuna, and Pinocchio and Jiminy were swept inside along with them. Inside the whale's belly, it was dark and cavernous. But then they saw a flickering light. It was a lantern on a small raft. And on that raft was Geppetto, thin and weak, but alive. "Father!" Pinocchio cried. Geppetto couldn't believe his eyes. They hugged, overjoyed to be reunited in such an impossible place, but their reunion was bittersweet. They were still trapped. Pinocchio, however, had a clever idea. "Father, let's build a big fire," he said. They gathered pieces of driftwood from inside the whale and started a huge smoky fire. The smoke filled Monstro's belly, making him uncomfortable. He tossed and turned, and then, achoo! The giant whale let out a tremendous sneeze that shot the raft, Geppetto, Pinocchio, and Jiminy right out of his mouth and into the stormy sea. The waves were massive, and their raft was smashed to pieces. Geppetto couldn't swim well and was about to go under. "Father, grab my tail!" shouted Pinocchio. With all his might, the little wooden puppet pulled his father through the crashing waves towards the shore. It took every bit of his strength, but he finally got Geppetto safely to the beach before collapsing, his wooden body still and lifeless on the sand. Geppetto carried Pinocchio's still form back to the workshop, his heart broken. He laid the little puppet on his bed, weeping for the brave son he had lost. Jiminy Cricket, too, cried for his lost friend, but the Blue Fairy had been watching. She saw that Pinocchio had proven himself. He had been brave, truthful, and completely unselfish, sacrificing himself to save his father. A gentle light filled the room, and the Blue Fairy's voice echoed softly. "Now you have proven yourself brave, truthful, and unselfish. Awake, Pinocchio, awake!" Pinocchio's eyes slowly opened. He looked at his hands. They weren't made of wood anymore. They were soft and pink. He touched his face, his legs. He was real, a real boy. He jumped out of bed, laughing with joy. "Father, I am a real boy." Geppetto looked up, his tears of sorrow turning into tears of pure happiness. He hugged his son, his real, living, breathing son. The little workshop was filled with music and laughter as they danced and celebrated, joined by Jiminy Cricket, who proudly polished the shiny gold badge the blue fairy had given him, a badge that read "Official Conscience." Pinocchio had finally learned what it meant to be good, and his wonderful adventure had just begun. Thanks for listening, little dreamers. Sleep tight, and we'll see you for our next story.